She'll be gone soon anyway. Then we can sort the house out. That was the first thing I heard after they took off my oxygen mask. Not a nurse, not a doctor. My own daughter's voice, low and casual, like she was confirming the weather. I didn't open my eyes right away. I lay there, listening, pretending I was still under. She must have thought I was. Or maybe she didn't care. I told Randy we'll get the house soon. Mom can't last much longer. The doctor said so, remember? A chair scraped. Someone, probably my grandson, mumbled something about probate, deeds, just needing her signature while she's still what? Alive? I waited until their footsteps left the room. Then I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, pale, pockmarked, and unfamiliar. Like the way they spoke of me. I reached for the button to call the nurse. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to hear a voice that wasn't plotting my funeral. When she came in, young, tired, kind, I asked her to bring my purse. She hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "It's in the drawer." I pointed with what little strength I had. "The brown one." She brought it over. I unzipped it slowly, my hands shaky. Beneath the tissues and old receipts was the thing they wanted, the deed. Still folded, still signed. My house, my name, no one else's. I pressed it against my chest, just for a second. They thought I was going to die. And maybe I was. But I wasn't going to die like that. Not as a line in someone's inheritance. Not without showing them that I was still here. Still breathing. Still mine. By the time they wheeled me out of the hospital, the weather had turned. September in Ohio always did that. Sun one day, cold, spit the next. Shayla stood by the car with her phone in hand, barely glancing up as I was loaded in. "Careful with her leg," she told the nurse. "She bruises like old fruit." She didn't say it kindly. Randy was in the driver's seat, tapping at the GPS. He didn't get out. The ride home was quiet, not peaceful, quiet like tension, like when a dog watches you from across the room, waiting to see if you'll drop something. At the house, Randy finally moved, pulling my wheelchair from the trunk. They'd brought me home all right, but it wasn't out of love. It was positioning. Shayla fussed at the pillows, the meds, the schedule for the nurse visits. But she never asked how I was, just what time I was supposed to take the blood thinners and if I could still sign things. When she went to unpack the hospital bag, I saw her hands go for the purse. I watched from the recliner. My eyes might have been dim, but I could still read intentions clear as day. "You looking for something?" I asked, voice dry. She startled. Just a flicker, then smiled. That fake stretch of lips she's worn since she was 20. "Just trying to find your house keys. They were on the ring, weren't they? No one's changing the locks." She laughed like I'd told a joke. "Don't be silly, Mom. It's just for safety. Randy's going to help organize the files, all the house documents. We want everything in one place, just in case." "Just in case I died," she meant. I nodded slowly, then turned my head toward the window. Let her think I was too tired to argue. The deed was under my pillow. Later that evening, I heard them whispering in the kitchen. The same tone people use at estate sales. That mix of excitement and guilt. "She's still got it somewhere," Randy said. "She'll forget about it eventually. She's not all there anymore." No, I wasn't all there. I was more than there. And the next morning, I'd make a call that would remind them exactly who still lived in this house. The next morning, I waited until they left for groceries. I knew their routine already. Leave me in front of the TV with a lukewarm cup of tea and a blanket I didn't ask for, then rush off to run errands that always took just long enough for me to be unattended. Perfect. I reached under the pillow and pulled out the envelope with the deed. My fingers were slow, but my memory was sharp. I slid it into my cardigan pocket and made my way to the phone. Dialing the lawyer's office took me 3 tries. Not because I forgot the number, I hadn't, but because my hands trembled. Not from weakness, from clarity. The kind that sets in when you stop hoping people will change. "Yes, hello," I said when they answered. "This is Mildred Kane. I'd like to schedule a private consultation, urgent." The woman on the line was polite, efficient. "We can fit you in tomorrow at 10 a.m. Will you need assistance getting in?" "No," I said. "I'll get there." After I hung up, I sat there a moment, holding the receiver in my lap like it was something holy. Because it was. It was the first thing I'd done for myself in years. That evening, Shayla came in with a smile too wide and breath too minty. Something was off. "We were thinking," she said, easing onto the armrest beside me. "Maybe we should start sorting through some of the attic boxes. You know, just to get ahead of things." "Ahead of what?" "You never know what's up there," Randy added from the doorway. "Old papers, maybe even titles or documents you forgot about." My stomach turned. "We could make a little folder," Shayla continued, reaching for my hand. "Something simple, just so when the time comes—" I pulled my hand away. "I'll be handling my own documents," I said, voice flat. Silence. Then she stood up, brushing invisible crumbs off her jeans. "Of course. We were only trying to help." Of course. Only trying to help. Like the time they helped by taking over my checkbook for convenience. Or when they helped by driving me to appointments and making sure to stay in the room. This wasn't care. This was custody. That night, I locked the bedroom door. Not because I was scared, because I was done pretending to be grateful for a cage wrapped in kindness. At 9:10 the next morning, I was already dressed. Not in anything fancy, just my pressed gray slacks, a clean blouse, and the wool cardigan with the steady buttons. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Me. The taxi driver tried to make small talk on the way to the law office, but I wasn't in the mood. I stared out the window, watching the town drift by. Same streets, same cracked sidewalks, same corner store with the rusted ice machine. Nothing had changed. Except me. By 9:52, I was in the lobby, the deed pressed between my coat and my side. At exactly 10 Gao, they called my name. The lawyer, Mr. Abramson, was maybe in his 40s, kind eyes, a quiet voice. He greeted me with a politeness that didn't feel fake and didn't speak down to me, which already made him better than most. "I understand you'd like to review your estate documents," he said, motioning me into a seat across from his desk. "No," I said. "I'd like to revoke them." He paused, eyebrows slightly raised. "All of them?" "Yes." He opened a folder, pulled up something on his computer. "You have a will from 2014 listing your daughter, Shayla Knox, as your primary heir and executor. Is that the one you'd like to cancel?" I nodded. "And the power of attorney, and any access they have to my finances. I want everything gone. Starting today." He blinked, took a breath, then said carefully, "Of course. May I ask—" "I'm not being dramatic," I interrupted. "I'm not confused. I'm not sick. I'm angry. And that's different." He gave a slow, respectful nod. "I was in the hospital last week," I continued, "on oxygen. Couldn't speak, could barely breathe. And I heard my daughter whisper to my grandson that they'd get the house soon." Mr. Abramson didn't flinch. He just folded his hands. "I'm sorry to hear that." "I'm not," I said. Because it woke me up. I raised that girl alone after her father died. I worked 3 jobs some years, bought that house cash, and now I'm supposed to fade away so she can upgrade her kitchen. I reached into my bag and slid the deed across the desk. This is mine. It's going to stay mine until I decide otherwise. And I want to put protections in place to ensure no one touches it while I'm alive, and no one assumes they will after. He nodded again. We can set up a trust and a new will, and I'll have you sign a document today revoking the prior ones. He pulled out the papers, explained each one clearly. I listened carefully. No nodding along, no letting someone else handle it. I'd done that too long. By 10:47, I was signing the last form. My hand didn't shake. When I dotted the final I felt something uncoil in my chest. Do you have a new beneficiary in mind? Mr. Abramson asked, pen poised. I thought about it. Shyla's face, Randy's silence, the attic boxes, the false sweetness. Then I thought of someone else. There's a girl, I said slowly. My great-niece, Olivia, 23, quiet. Comes by sometimes just to help in the yard. Never asks for anything. Last time she brought a pie she baked herself, just because I told her once I missed Peach. I looked out the window. Put her name down. For now. For now? He asked. If she changes, I'll change it back. I'm not naive anymore. He wrote it carefully, then stood. We'll finalize everything next week, but the revocation is in effect immediately. I shook his hand, firmly. I don't think he expected that. On the cab ride back, the air tasted different, lighter, like the weight on my chest wasn't just from the lungs after all. Shyla met me at the front door, arms crossed, eyes full of suspicion. Where were you? Out. Out where? None of your business. She blinked, stunned. I was worried. No, you were curious, I said, brushing past her. I went straight to my room and put the folder with the new documents in the locked drawer of my desk. Let them check the attic. They wouldn't find what they were looking for. And by the time they realized it, I'd be long done playing the part they cast me in. They knew something had changed. I could see it in the way they started hovering. Shayla would peek into my room under the excuse of fluffing pillows or bringing in laundry I never asked for. Randy lingered in the hallway more often, offering to help with bills, with paperwork, with technology stuff. I let them circle like vultures around a meal that refused to die. You've been acting strange, Shyla said over dinner one evening. She made spaghetti, as if carbs might soften my resolve. Strange how? I asked, not looking up from my plate. I don't know. Just distant. I've been dying, remember? I said dryly, stabbing at the noodles. Her fork paused midair. That's not what I meant. But it was. She wanted the old version of me back, the one who nodded and signed and said thank you when someone stole the reins of her life. I got a call from the bank, she added, more casually than necessary. They said something about a document change. You didn't tell me you were making updates. That's because it didn't concern you. Her eyes narrowed, just for a second. I thought we agreed. No, I interrupted. You decided. I stayed silent. That's not agreement. There it was, the first crack in her composure. I excused myself before she could recover, heading down the hall with my tea. Behind me, I heard Randy mutter, "She's going to make things difficult." Difficult. As if I were an obstacle to their prize. That night, I sat in bed and pulled out the drawer. Inside, the folder from Mr. Abramson, now labeled with a sticky note in Olivia's careful handwriting. Auntie M's stuff. Important. I hadn't told Olivia anything yet. I wasn't ready, but I trusted her hands more than any blood relative I had left. The next morning, they upped the ante. I scheduled a home nurse to come by, Shayla announced brightly over toast, just to assess things, see what support you need. I looked up. I don't need support. I need space. She'll only be here once a week. Insurance covers most of it. And the rest? She blinked. Well, we'd cover the difference, of course. It's for your health, Mom. For control, she meant. No, I said. Cancel it. But, no. The word landed heavy. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. After a few seconds of stunned silence, she stood up and left the room. I heard the click of her heels down the hall. A door slammed. That evening, I went into the attic. Not for old documents, but for the box of photographs I'd kept hidden. Not in albums, not on display. Just a box of moments I never wanted to forget. Me and Robert, the summer before he died. Shyla at 5, covered in mud. Me on the porch, holding a trophy I won for baking at the church fair. Proof of who I was, of what I'd done, of a life that wasn't just waiting to be inherited. I spent hours going through them, sorting, remembering, reminding myself that I hadn't always been this old woman with thin skin and thick pills. I'd been a builder, a mother, a woman who survived loss without losing herself. Until I did, but not anymore. Downstairs, I heard the television turn on, Randy's heavy footsteps, Shayla pacing the kitchen, no doubt texting someone with that tight jaw she always wore when things didn't go her way. They thought they were dealing with a woman on her last legs. They had no idea I'd only just stood up. I wasn't always like this, you know. There was a time I said yes to everything, not out of weakness, don't let them tell you that, out of necessity. When Robert died, I was 38 with a daughter to raise and a mortgage that wouldn't wait for grief. There wasn't time for softness. I got up the next morning and went to work. 3 jobs. Day shifts, night shifts, weekends. I cleaned houses, ran a secondhand shop out of the garage, stitched hems and buttons for people who didn't look me in the eye. I paid that mortgage off 12 years early. The house. They talk about it like it's a relic, but it's not. It's the one thing that came from me. I chose the yellow paint, the windows that stick in spring, the big maple tree that still stands stubborn as ever in the front yard. I didn't inherit it. I bled for it. Shyla used to understand that. When she was little, she'd sit on the kitchen floor while I worked at the sewing machine. I'd hand her fabric scraps, and she'd make clothes for her dolls. Awful little things with crooked sleeves and buttons for eyes. She was always watching. Curious. Smart. But that girl disappeared sometime around her second year of college, the year she met Randy, I think. After that, she didn't visit home unless she needed something. A loan, a recommendation, help with moving, help with the baby. They were always in some kind of trouble. Always tight on cash. Always right on the edge of the next big thing. And me? I gave. I gave because that's what mothers do. Because I wanted to believe they just needed time. Because I told myself it was temporary. But time passed, and nothing changed, except what they thought they were entitled to. It wasn't always cruel, not at first. Just thoughtless. They'd come over and bring cheap wine, call it a visit. Shyla would sigh when I didn't have oat milk. Randy would fix something in the yard, then leave it half done. They'd tell me I was lucky to have them around, even as they walked out with bags full of leftovers and borrowed cash. I kept my mouth shut. I thought silence was the price of closeness. But the older I got, the more invisible I became. By the time I turned 78, Shayla had started referring to the house as theirs in passing. "When we redo the upstairs," she once said, "after you settle down into assisted living." I remember standing at the sink, my hand in dishwater, wondering how long I'd been seen as furniture. Something temporary, something in the way. It came to a head the year I fell in the garden. Nothing serious, just a sprained wrist. But Randy insisted on installing a camera in the living room for emergencies. What he didn't say was that it also pointed at the front door. I caught on quick. After that, the calls became more frequent, but never about me. They were about the house, the insurance, the future. Always the future, never the now. The worst part? I started believing them. Started thinking maybe I was the burden. Maybe I was in the way. Maybe it was time to make things easier for them. That's when Shayla brought me the forms. Quietly, kindly. "Just in case something happens, Mom," she said, laying the papers out like a picnic. "This is just a power of attorney. This is just about the house. You'd still be living here." I was tired. It had been a bad week. My ankles were swollen and the oven wasn't working. I signed. That was 3 years ago. Since then, they've acted like I handed them the keys to my soul. But last week, when I lay in that hospital bed, fighting for air, listening to my daughter whisper to her son about how soon they'd get the house, something broke. And when something breaks in you at this age, you don't glue it back. You throw it out. You start over. Now, when I see the house, I don't see a burden. I see a line, one I should have drawn long ago, and now I have. I hadn't meant to find the folder. It was tucked in the drawer of the old desk in the guest room, the one Shayla started using as her office after she insisted it made more sense to stay over a few nights a week. "To keep an eye on things," she said. I'd gone in to look for my sewing kit. The lining on my cardigan pocket was starting to tear, and I didn't want to ask them for help. The folder was plain manila, no label, but thick with papers. My name was on the first page, bold and centered. It wasn't the shock of seeing my name, it was the words beneath it. Application for adult guardianship. I stared at the header. Then I sat down. Each sheet was more galling than the last. Medical forms I'd never seen. A typed letter, apparently written on my behalf, requesting the court to grant full authority to Shayla Knox over my estate and decisions due to progressive cognitive decline and vulnerability to manipulation. Manipulation. I looked at the signature line. Unsigned, for now. A handwritten sticky note was attached to the back page in Shayla's slanted cursive. Need Mildred's signature before December. Otherwise, we'll need affidavit from Dr. Kumar. Dr. Kumar, my general practitioner. Friendly man, always asking about my crocheting, always telling me I didn't look a day over 70. I felt sick. Not dizzy, not woozy. Sick. Like something thick had risen from my stomach and lodged itself in my throat. This wasn't about helping. This was an ambush. A legal muzzle dressed as care. I stood up, folder in hand, and went to the shredder in the hall closet, the one I'd kept since the years I did taxes for half the neighborhood. Page after page, I fed it through. Some people scream, some throw things. I use a machine with teeth. That night, I locked the guest room door. When Shayla knocked, I told her I was sleeping. She asked if I'd seen her planning binder. No, I said. I don't keep track of your plans. She laughed, forced, brittle. No worries. Probably left it in the car. Right. She didn't mention it again. The next day, I called Dr. Kumar's office. "Hello, this is Mildred Kane," I said. "I'd like to request a full copy of my medical file, and I'd like to know if anyone's contacted you about signing anything on my behalf." The nurse on the line sounded confused. "I'm not aware of anything like that, ma'am. But I can flag your file and leave a note that no third-party inquiries should be processed without your verbal consent." "Yes," I said. "Do that. In writing." Then I called Mr. Abramson, told him what I'd found. "That crosses a line," he said after a long pause. "We'll add another layer of protection. I can prepare a notarized statement confirming your mental and legal competence. And if they try to pursue this, we'll contest it with everything we have." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat back in my chair and looked around the room. This house had been mine for over 4 decades. I'd repainted the walls, patched the roof, replaced the furnace twice. There wasn't a door I hadn't closed with my own hands. And now my daughter was trying to use my age as a crowbar to pry it from me. I thought of Robert. What he'd say. What he'd do. But the truth was, Robert never had to live this long. He died at 58, with dignity intact, with his wife beside him and his child still asking for advice, not his will. Me? I was learning what happens after that, when they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as an opportunity. Well, let them. Let them see the surface. But beneath it, I was already miles ahead. Walls reinforced. Locks changed. Figuratively and otherwise. Shyla still walked around like she was closing in. But I was no longer retreating. I was waiting. It happened on a Tuesday, which felt fitting. An unremarkable day for something long overdue. The night before, I sat in my chair by the window, the lamp dimmed, the silence thick around me. I'd had the documents reprinted, signed and sealed, and I'd tucked them neatly in a file labeled in large black letters. MK, legal. I didn't hide them. I placed the file on the kitchen counter. Let them see it. Let them wonder. Shyla saw it first. Her mouth tightened, but she didn't ask. Not then. She went about her evening as if nothing had changed, washing dishes with more clatter than necessary, refilling my pill tray like she was measuring explosives. She didn't sleep in the guest room that night. The next morning, I was finishing my toast when she came in. No good morning. Just that look. Tight shoulders, jaw set. Her voice clipped like a paper cut. "What is this?" she asked, holding the file. I didn't pretend not to know. "That's my business. You revoked everything." Her voice was low, like she couldn't believe it. The will, the power of attorney, everything. I nodded. "But why?" Her face contorted, caught between insult and disbelief. "After everything we've done for you?" I looked at her slowly. "What exactly have you done for me, Shayla?" She blinked. "Excuse me? What have you done for me that wasn't about you? About Randy? About the house?" I folded my napkin carefully, set it beside my plate. Because as far as I recall, every casserole came with a question about my accounts. Every errand ended with a conversation about the future of the property. Every time you refilled my medication, it was followed by a discussion of easing the burden. "That's not fair," she snapped. "We've been here, haven't we? Taking care of things, making sure you're safe, that you don't get overwhelmed." "Safe from what?" I asked. "Overwhelmed by what? My own life?" "You're getting older, Mom. You don't think as clearly. You don't move as fast. You need help. I need respect." That stopped her. "I need to be asked, not handled," I continued. I need to be seen as a person, not a problem to be solved. And I need my own daughter to stop treating me like a placeholder in her real estate plans. Her cheeks flushed. We weren't. You were. My voice was quiet, steady. And I heard you. In the hospital. Shyla's lips parted, but no sound came out. I heard you tell Randy the house would be yours soon, that I couldn't last much longer. I heard you say the doctor said so. She sank into the kitchen chair like her knees had given out. I didn't mean, but you said it, and now I know where I stand. She stared down at her hands, for once, silent. You're angry, she said finally, her voice too smooth. I get that. But don't throw away your family because of one bad moment. I laughed, bitter and dry. This wasn't a moment. It was a campaign. She tried a different tactic. What about Randy? What about all the help we've given? The hours we've spent? You weren't helping, I said. You were investing. You just thought the payout would come sooner. Shayla stood abruptly, arms crossed. So what now? You just cut us out. No, I said calmly. I've simply put things back where they belong, in my name, under my terms. If that feels like being cut out, maybe you should ask yourself why. She didn't answer. She left the room with hard, echoing steps, the file still in her hand. But I wasn't worried. The real documents were at the bank now. What she held was a decoy. I sat back in my chair, feeling the pulse in my fingers settle. My heart, quiet. My breathing, even. I'd spoken, not with cruelty, with clarity. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I told the truth. And I wasn't sorry. The days that followed were quiet in the way a field is after a storm. Flattened grass, broken stalks, but a strange kind of peace in the air. Shyla stopped staying over. Randy didn't appear at all. The house finally settled back into its own rhythms. Creaking floorboards, the soft tick of the clock above the stove, my footsteps. Mine, alone. At first, I mistook the silence for loneliness. And maybe it was at first. I'd spent so many years living around them, inside their moods, their plans, their noises, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly alone in my space. I'd grown used to people hovering without really seeing me. Now, no one hovered. And I could breathe. I took my time in the mornings, made eggs just how I liked them, over hard, no pepper, read the newspaper at the table instead of in my chair like a patient, wore my slippers all day just because I could. The house wasn't empty. It was mine again. Then, on the fourth day, the doorbell rang. I shuffled over, slow but steady, and peered through the side glass. Olivia. She stood there awkwardly, holding a small paper bag and a folded jacket, her hair pinned back like she'd rushed out of the house. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. I brought banana bread, she said as I opened the door. It's still warm. I stepped aside without a word, motioning her in. The living room looked lived in again. My shawl draped over the couch, a book open on the armrest, my reading glasses exactly where I'd left them. Olivia noticed and smiled. You look good, she said, setting the bag down on the coffee table. Rested. I am. She didn't push, just settled onto the edge of the couch and looked around, as if cataloging every little change since her last visit. You haven't been picking up the phone? She said gently. No, I agreed. I haven't. Mom said, she paused, caught herself. I mean, Aunt Shyla said you weren't feeling well. Did she? Olivia hesitated, then looked me in the eye. Is that true? I smiled, a slow, tired sort of smile. No, I'm feeling better than I have in years. She let out a breath, some knot in her shoulders releasing. I was hoping that was the truth. We sat in the kind of silence that only comes with someone who isn't waiting to talk. Then she said, "She's mad." I nodded. "I know. They said you're being manipulated, that someone's gotten in your head, that it's not like you to make changes." I sipped my tea. Maybe they just never knew what I was like. They only knew what was convenient. Olivia looked down at her hands. "You know, when I was little, I used to think this house was magic. Not just because of the cookies or the way the curtains smelled like cinnamon, but because it felt like it knew me, like I belonged. That nearly broke me." "You do," I said softly. She glanced up, surprised. I leaned forward. "Olivia, I didn't make these decisions out of spite. I made them because I finally remembered that I get to have a say in my own life. And I remembered who's shown up for me without asking for anything in return." Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "I never did it for that." "I know," I said. "That's why it matters." We talked for another hour about her work, her clumsy cat, the community garden she volunteers at. I told her about the documents, everything. I watched her face as I spoke, not for judgment, but for understanding. And I saw it, clear as day. "You're not alone," she said, reaching over and squeezing my hand, "even if it feels that way sometimes." It did, but less now. After she left, I sat for a long time in the quiet. Then I did something small, but sacred. I pulled out a fresh pad of paper and wrote Olivia's name at the top, not just as an heir, as a witness, as a reminder that even in the long shadow of age, a life can still be re-anchored. I folded the paper carefully and tucked it inside the legal folder in my desk. Not everything had to be a fight. Some things could just be chosen. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, like I always used to before the years got heavy on my bones. I made coffee the way Robert liked it, strong enough to keep a farmer up, and drank it black, just to remind myself I still could. By 8 o'clock, I was dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad. My writing was slower these days, but my thoughts weren't. I made a list. Banks, insurance, investment accounts. I wasn't going to wait for another accident to happen. One of those "oh, she forgot she gave us access" mishaps Shayla was so good at spinning. By 9:30, I was at the bank. They greeted me like I was a ghost. All polite smiles, but that undercurrent of surprise. "She still walks in here herself?" "Yes, I do." A young man with neatly parted hair ushered me into a private room. He looked like someone who still asked his mother to do his taxes. "How can we assist you today, Mrs. Kane?" I set down a thick folder. "I need to restructure everything, and I want you to walk me through it like I've never seen a dollar before." He blinked. "Of course." 2 hours later, I had closed 3 accounts, opened a new one in my name only, and set up digital alerts for every transaction. I revoked every authorization Shayla or Randy had ever been given. It felt like untangling a necklace I didn't realize had been strangling me. Then I asked about a trust. He looked up from his keyboard. "Are you thinking of transferring property?" "I'm thinking of protecting what's already mine." He nodded slowly, caught the shift in my voice. "We can connect you with our estate specialist." "Already have one," I said. "Mr. Abramson, I want this trust tied directly to what he's setting up." "Yes, ma'am." We went over the details. I named Olivia as the successor trustee. She wouldn't know right away. That wasn't the point. The point was, I had a plan. Afterward, I walked home instead of calling for a ride. It was a mild day, leaves starting to turn, air thick with the scent of distant fireplaces. The walk was slow, but mine. Every step a small reclaiming. When I reached the house, I stood outside for a long minute, just looking at it. The porch still sagged slightly on the left. Randy promised to fix it 3 winters ago. The shutters could use a paint, but it was still strong, still mine. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. No one waiting, no eyes tracking me. Just the click of the lock behind me and the smell of my own soap from the morning. I made tea. Not the herbal junk Shyla insisted on. Real black tea, dark as ink, with a spoonful of honey. Then I sat at the desk and opened the new ledger I'd started. Clean pages, no corrections. I wrote, October 14th. Financial accounts secured. Property held in trust. All third-party authorizations revoked. Official copies delivered to Mr. Abramson. Private copies stored in fireproof box. I am not a placeholder. I am not an obstacle. I am the author of my own endgame. The pen left a deep indentation in the paper. I liked that. I wanted it to leave a mark. That afternoon, I called Olivia. I've made a few decisions, I told her. About the house? She asked, voice careful. About everything. There was a pause. You want to talk about it? Not yet, I said. But I want you to know, when the time comes, it's going to make sense. I trust you. 4 words. They softened something I hadn't realized was still clenched. Thank you, I whispered. We talked about small things after that. The rain barrels she was building for her garden, the cat that wouldn't stop attacking her laundry. I laughed more than I expected to. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, quiet inside. Later that evening, I heard the mailbox rattle. I shuffled out, expecting junk flyers. Instead, a white envelope with no return address. Inside, a folded letter in Shyla's handwriting. Only 1 line. We need to talk. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. I folded it back up, slid it into the trash, and poured myself another cup of tea. Let her wait. The knock came just before noon, sharp and rapid, like someone who'd been rehearsing it all morning. I was at the kitchen table, halfway through the crossword and my second cup of tea. I didn't get up right away. Let her stand there a minute, learn that the door doesn't open on her schedule anymore. When I did open it, Shayla stood stiff on the porch, arms crossed, eyes scanning me like a nurse doing triage. You've been ignoring my messages, she said. No, I replied, stepping aside. I've been declining to answer them. She didn't like that. Her jaw clenched, but she came in, walked to the living room like it was still hers to walk through. I didn't want to do this here, she said, sitting without being asked. But you're not giving me a choice. You always have a choice, I said, easing into my chair. You just don't like when other people do. She didn't answer that. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers, highlighted, tabbed, aggressively organized. This is the original estate plan, the one we agreed on. No, I said. The one I signed because you put it in front of me during a week when I couldn't hold a spoon without shaking. Shyla exhaled, long and dramatic. You're overreacting. I was underreacting for 15 years. She tapped the documents. Do you know what this looks like to people, Mom? Banks, lawyers, family. You're making erratic changes to your estate, cutting out your only child, giving everything to… What? A niece who visits twice a month? I stared at her. You think this is about a bank balance? Her voice sharpened. It's about your legacy, about what's reasonable. Olivia's just a kid. She doesn't understand what it means to take care of someone like you. I don't need to be taken care of like a broken appliance, I said quietly. I need to be respected. And you don't seem capable of that. That's not true, she snapped. I've done everything for you. No, I said. You've done everything around me, for yourself. Her hands shook slightly as she restacked the pages. You're letting your feelings cloud your judgment, she said, her voice trembling now, less righteous and more afraid. I tilted my head. Is that what you told the court when you started filing for guardianship without my knowledge? She froze. So, she didn't know I'd found it. Where did you hear that? She asked too quickly. In my own house, I replied. In the desk drawer you didn't think I'd check. Next to the papers with my forged signature. That's not… She stopped herself, visibly recalibrating. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to control me. Silence. Her face flushed. The mask was cracking now, the one she wore around neighbors and lawyers and pharmacists, the one that said, I'm the responsible daughter. I'd seen that mask for years and called it love. Now I saw it for what it was. Strategy. I'm not changing the documents back, I said. Not now, not later. Then you're making a huge mistake, she said through gritted teeth. No, I said, standing slowly, my knees stiff but dependable. I made the mistake of believing my silence would earn your loyalty. I won't make it again. She stood too, chest rising, eyes hard. I don't think you understand what you're doing. I met her gaze. I understand exactly. She didn't slam the door when she left. She wasn't careless like that. No, Shayla was the kind of person who closed things quietly, so no one would hear the damage. But I heard it anyway. I sat back down, opened my crossword, found my place. The clue was 6 down, a state of being whole, undivided. I filled in the word, integrity. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a contradiction. It was only a matter of time before the boy showed up. Randy arrived 3 days later, driving his father's old truck like it made him look more serious. He didn't knock, just stood at the screen door with his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched like a teenager who knew detention was coming. I opened the door and waited. He didn't speak right away. Can I come in? I stepped aside without a word. He took it as permission, though I hadn't said yes. He moved like he owned the place, or hoped to. Sat in Robert's old chair without asking. That rubbed me raw. I thought maybe we could talk, he said, all gentle-voiced and squinting like I'd turned the sun up just for spite. Things have gotten a little tense. I didn't answer. Let the silence show its teeth. He cleared his throat. I know Mom came by. She's upset. You've made some big changes, and I think, well, we think it's worth discussing. We? I asked. Yeah, he said. Me, Mom, even some of the family. Everyone's kind of confused about what's going on. Why you'd change the will, cut us out. Why Olivia? I didn't look at him. I reached for my tea and took a slow sip. She's barely part of the family, he continued. She doesn't understand everything you've built. Not like we do. I smiled into my cup. That's the point. He leaned forward, earnest now. You're upset. You think Mom did something wrong? Maybe she said the wrong thing at the wrong time. But cutting us out? That's not you. I finally looked up. You don't know who I am, Randy. He looked startled, like I'd slapped him with a sentence. You've seen the version of me that signs checks and nods politely. The one who keeps the fridge full and the questions few. You know the version that gives, not the woman who built something from scratch. Who didn't take from anyone. not even when she should have. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I was your grandmother when it suited you, I said. When tuition was due. When your car broke down. When Shyla didn't want to pay for Christmas. But not when I needed help carrying groceries. Not when I was in the hospital. That's not fair. Fair? I said, my voice rising just slightly. You want to talk about fair? Fair would be you showing up without a motive. Fair would be you calling just to ask how I slept. He looked away, jaw clenched. You can tell your mother, I continued, that I won't be changing a thing, and that showing up in your Sunday manners doesn't change the fact that you stood next to her that day in the hospital, talking about how soon you'd have the house. His head snapped back to me. You heard that? I wasn't dead yet, Randy. He stood suddenly, pacing a few steps. Okay, so maybe we were wrong. Maybe we got carried away. Carried away? I said, standing now too, tired of him looming. You stood over my bed and discussed my home like I was a loose tile to pry up. He shook his head. It was a mistake, okay? But you've made your point. Loud and clear. What more do you want? I don't want anything, I said. And it was true. I wanted peace, not punishment. He rubbed the back of his neck. So what now? We pretend none of this happened? No, I said. We stopped pretending anything did. He swallowed. The mask was slipping now. He looked like a boy again, caught with his hand in the drawer. Look, he said. You're mad, but be careful. People talk. Family notices things. That, right there, was the mistake. I stepped closer. Are you threatening me? No, I'm just saying, get out. He froze. What? You heard me. He didn't move at first, like he expected me to take it back. I didn't. Finally, he exhaled, turned, and walked out. No slamming. Just the slow grind of gravel under his boots. I closed the door behind him, locked it. Then I leaned against it, not shaking, not crying, just still. That night, I slept without dreams. Only silence. Blessed, rightful silence. It came in the afternoon mail. A small envelope, pale green, with my name written in Olivia's round, careful script. No return address, just her handwriting, just Mildred across the front. Not Grandma, not Ms. Kane. Just my name. As if she saw me the way I wanted to be seen, not as a role or a duty or a wallet, but as a person. I brought it inside, sat down at the kitchen table and opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded note card, handwritten, no printed fluff, no glitter. Just this. I hope I'm not overstepping. I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me, for telling me the truth, for letting me sit at your table like it meant something. Because to me, it did. I know I'm not your daughter. I'm not even your granddaughter, really. But if love is measured by presence, not blood, then maybe I've earned the right to say, I love you, Mildred, and I'm proud of you. I sat with the card open in my lap for a long time. The clock ticked. The house creaked. The refrigerator hummed its tired little song. But I couldn't move, because there it was. Recognition. Not from the people I fed and clothed and defended for decades, but from the one who simply saw me. A warmth started in my chest. Not the kind that leads to tears, the kind that leads to strength. I stood up, walked to the old oak dresser, and pulled out the will Mr. Abramson had drafted. For a long time, I'd left Olivia's name in pencil. That day, I took out a pen. Permanent ink. I didn't hesitate. Later, I baked cornbread, her favorite, and set aside a slice. Tomorrow I'd drive it over, not to make a gesture, just to visit, just to share something that didn't cost a thing, but still meant everything. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket across my knees and watched the wind move through the maple leaves like it had somewhere better to be. The sun was setting slow, warm on my face, soft on the lawn. And in that moment, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt returned to myself. No audience, no performance. Just Mildred, with her cornbread and her clean will, and her permanent name, finally in the right place. Shayla didn't come back. Not that week, not the next. No phone call, no second letter, no cousin sent as a messenger with concern stitched into their voice. Just silence. Randy didn't call either, though I did see his truck once, parked a few blocks down. Engine off, windows up, watching. Let them watch. I had nothing left to give them, and more importantly, I had nothing they could take. I thought I'd feel the loss heavier, if I'm honest. I thought there'd be grief. I raised Shayla, after all. Fed her, bathed her, held her in the middle of the night when her father's death left a hole in both of us. For years, she was the reason I got out of bed in the morning, the reason I saved pennies in jars and patched her jeans with the neatest little stitches you ever saw. But the grief had already come. It had come in drips over decades, like a faucet with a leak no one would fix. And by the time I turned off the tap, there was no flood. Just quiet. That's what filled the house now. Quiet. But it wasn't empty. It was clean. There's a difference. No more tense dinners. No more veiled comments about when the time comes. No more rummaging through my drawers under the guise of helping. Just the sound of my own breath and the birds outside and the rhythm of a home that finally belonged to someone who loved it. I opened the windows again. I played records I hadn't touched in years. I let the maple leaves gather on the porch without sweeping them right away. The house aged alongside me, not in spite of me. And I let it. I started writing again, too. Little essays, mostly. Nothing dramatic. Just truths I'd held in my chest too long. Stories from when I was young, or things I'd never told anyone about Robert. Or thoughts that came to me while peeling carrots. I wrote longhand, with a pen that leaked a little and made my fingers blue. And Olivia came by once a week. Always unannounced. Always welcome. She never stayed too long, never asked for anything. Sometimes we just sat with tea and didn't say much. But there was nothing performative in her presence. She didn't come to check up. She came to be with me. One afternoon, she found the photo albums. We were looking for the charger to my old radio, and I opened the wrong drawer in the sideboard. Out spilled a stack of worn books, leather corners curling, pages loose from years of shuffling. "Can I look?" she asked. Of course. She flipped slowly. Her eyes lit up with every turn. Me and Robert on the porch in 1971. Shayla at 10, missing a front tooth. My mother, straight-backed and proud, on a stool in our first kitchen. "Do you want me to scan these?" Olivia asked. "So you have digital copies?" I smiled. "No, I like the weight of them, the way they smell." She nodded. "They feel real." That's what this house had become again. Real. No staging, no posturing. Just a place where memories weren't being packaged and archived for someone else's profit. That night, after she left, I sat at the table and opened the last drawer in the file cabinet. Inside was the original copy of the will Shayla had pushed me to sign, the one that named her executor, sole beneficiary, legal steward of everything from the house to the tea kettle. I held it in my hands for a moment. Not out of sentiment. Out of awe. that I'd almost let this be it. That this could have been my legacy, a signature squeezed from exhaustion, a life dissolved into convenience. I shredded it, slowly, page by page, not out of anger, out of clarity. There's a time for holding on, and there's a time for removing rot. Shyla wasn't evil. That's not the story I'll tell, not even in these pages I never planned to publish. She was just never really with me, not the way I needed. She was with herself, with her expectations, her ambitions, her entitlement. But I'm with me now, and I'm with Olivia. And I'm with this home that creaks and leaks and forgives me every time I forget to water the philodendron in the window. Peace doesn't arrive like a parade. It's not loud. It doesn't demand a toast. It's the quiet between dishes clinking in the sink, the softness of your own sheets, the realization that no one is coming to take what's yours anymore. Not because they've changed, but because you have. This morning, I opened the letter from Mr. Abramson. Heavy envelope, embossed seal, no urgency in the postmark. Just quiet finality. Inside, confirmation. Everything filed, recorded, notarized. The house, the accounts, the trust, secured, in my name, under my will, with Olivia listed exactly as I intended. Not because she asked, because she never did. I laid the papers on the kitchen table and sat with them, not to reread, not to double-check, just to feel them there. Tangible proof that a woman can rewrite the ending others had planned for her. The windows were open, August wind moving through the curtains like a sigh, the kind you let out when you finally loosen your jaw after days of clenching. There's a rhythm to this house now. Not like before, not with Shyla's high heels clicking through the hallway, not with Randy's lazy footsteps dragging guilt behind them. No. Now it's just the sound of real things. The kettle boiling. Floorboards speaking when no one walks on them. Birds tapping the windowsill like they, too, have lived here long enough to forget they don't own it. I watered the plants. I fed the cat that adopted me last spring. One blue eye, one yellow, shows up only when she wants to be seen. Like me. I answered a call from the pharmacy. I said no to auto-renewal. I said yes to the slow version of life, where nothing needs rushing unless it's going cold. And then I walked out to the porch. The maple tree was shedding already, early for the season, as if even it was tired of waiting to let go. I sat down in the rocking chair Robert built for me in '84. He used leftover wood from the pantry shelves. Said waste was a sin, even for lumber. The armrests are still smooth, still hold the curve of my hands like memory itself. And I thought about what it all meant. Not the house. Not the legal battles. Not the moments I reclaimed like land someone tried to fence off. No. I thought about voice. How easy it is to lose it. How subtly people take it from you. A suggestion here, a signature there, a raised eyebrow, a changed subject, a decision made when you're too tired to protest. And then, one day, you look around and realize the story of your life is being told by someone else. But I took it back. Not with fists. Not with screaming matches or broken dishes. I took it back with pens and locks and long walks to the bank, with words spoken evenly across kitchen tables, with the gentle rejection of help that comes in greedy hands. People think aging means shrinking. They look at the bent back, the walker, the pill box, and they assume we've softened inside. But we don't. If anything, we become sharper. Our memories cut differently. They aren't loops anymore. They're edges. And if you hold one too long, it might open something you'd rather leave closed. I know Shyla will come back someday. Maybe for a holiday. Maybe when she hears someone else mention my name. She'll come with a new smile and a softened tone, and she'll talk about forgiveness like it's currency. I won't be cruel, but I won't unlock anything either. She made her choices. I made mine. We are, at last, two separate people. And if I see Randy, I'll nod. Not because I owe him grace, but because grace is mine to give now. On my terms. Olivia's coming over this weekend. She wants to paint the pantry. Says it's time the shelves held something new. I think she's right. We'll eat cornbread and drink 2 sweet lemonade and maybe listen to a record or two. And I'll tell her the story, not of how I lost everything, but of how I almost did and how I didn't. Because that's the part worth passing down. Not the pain, the decision, to live while it's still yours to live, to speak even if your voice shakes, to guard the deed, not just to the house, but to yourself. And if you're reading this, if you've made it this far, maybe it's time you did the same. Not loudly, not all at once, just one drawer at a time, one no at a time. One morning where you choose to stay yours, completely. And maybe, just maybe, that's how it all begins again.